Move her away from the cameras. That walker makes this place look like a charity ward. My daughter-in-law said that through clenched teeth at the grand opening of a senior care center that had been built on my wife's land, funded with my wife's savings, and named from a promise my wife made long before her hands ever started to shake. The woman with the walker was my wife, Evelyn. She was 71 years old. She had survived a stroke, buried both her parents, raised our only son, and spent 36 years as a nurse, holding the hands of people whose own children never came to visit. That morning, she had put on a pale blue dress because she thought it matched the ribbon they were going to cut out front. She had practiced walking from the parking lot to the entrance all week, one slow step at a time, because she did not want to embarrass anybody. And then the very people standing on her sacrifice decided she was the embarrassment. More than 200 guests heard my daughter-in-law Claire say it. County officials, hospital executives, donors, newspaper people, church ladies with white gloves, local businessmen with their names stitched into golf shirts. They all heard it. They all looked at my wife's bent fingers around the handles of that walker, but nobody moved. My son Aaron stood beside Claire with a pair of gold scissors in his hand, ready for the ribbon cutting. He saw his mother's face fold in on itself. He saw her lower her eyes like a child being scolded in public. And instead of defending her, he leaned close and whispered, "Mom, please don't make this difficult. Today is important." That was the moment I stopped having a son, in the way I had understood that word for 68 years. My name is Walter Briggs. I am 74 years old, and for most of my life, I believed a quiet man could hold a family together just by staying steady. I believed if you paid the bills, fixed the roof, showed up at the hospital, and kept your promises, the people you loved would remember where their foundation was. I was wrong. If you are somebody's father, somebody's mother, somebody's husband or wife, then stay with me a little while. Because this is a story about what happens when the people you carried start calling you dead weight. The grand opening was in Franklin, Tennessee, just outside Nashville, on a bright October morning that smelled like cut grass and expensive perfume. The building was called Willow Grace Living. It sat on 12 acres of soft green hillside that used to belong to Evelyn's daddy. There were maple trees along the driveway, a little pond behind the chapel, and a stone path Evelyn had asked them to make wide enough for wheelchairs. That path was her idea. Most things worth keeping about that place were her idea. When Evelyn was still working at St. Matthew's Hospital, she used to come home after night shifts with her feet swollen and her eyes red, carrying stories she could not put down. An old man named Mr. Pritchard who kept asking for his daughter even though the daughter had not visited in 6 months. A woman with dementia who cried every evening because she thought she had missed the school bus. A retired teacher who kept a birthday card on her nightstand from 1989 because it was the last one her son had sent. Evelyn would sit at our kitchen table, still in her scrubs, and say, "Walter, someday I want a place where old people aren't treated like storage." That was how it began. Not with investors, not with Claire's glossy brochures, not with Aaron's speeches about innovation and elder care. It began with my wife sitting under a yellow kitchen light, crying over strangers who had been forgotten. Years later, after Evelyn's parents passed, she inherited the land. I had made a decent living running a plumbing and heating company. Nothing fancy, but enough. We had savings. Evelyn had retirement money. We had the old farmhouse, paid for. Aaron had gone to college on our backs and our knees and his mother's double shifts. When Aaron came to us with the idea of building a senior living center, Evelyn thought God had answered something she had been whispering about for years. He said he wanted to honor her work. He said he wanted to build a different kind of place. He said all the right words, the way sons know how to do when they still need their parents to believe in them. Claire came later. She was polished from the top of her head to the points of her shoes. She had a marketing degree, a smile that knew where every camera was, and a way of saying family legacy that made rich people open checkbooks. She renamed Evelyn's dream, redesigned the logo, hired consultants, and slowly pushed my wife's fingerprints off the surface of the project. At first, I told myself that was just business. Evelyn told herself the same thing. When Claire said the old family name sounded too rural for the donor class, Evelyn nodded. When Claire changed the warm yellow walls to cold gray because it photographed better, Evelyn smiled. When Claire removed the rocking chairs from the front porch because they looked too nursing home, Evelyn went quiet. That was my wife. She spent her whole life making room for other people, even when they were pushing her out of her own. Then came the stroke. It was not the kind that takes you all at once. It was meaner than that. It took pieces, her balance, some strength in her right hand, a little confidence every time she crossed a room and felt people watching, but it did not touch her mind. Let me say that clearly, because it matters. Evelyn's mind was sharp. Her speech slowed, but her thoughts did not. Her hands trembled, but her judgment did not. Her body betrayed her. Her soul never did. By the time Willow Grace was ready to open, Aaron and Claire had become the faces of it. Their faces were in the magazine spread. Their names were on the invitations. Their interviews talked about their vision and their mission. Evelyn was mentioned once in small print as a family inspiration. She read that phrase 3 times at the breakfast table. Then she folded the magazine and said, "Inspiration is what people call you when they don't want to give you credit." I should have known then. The morning of the grand opening, Evelyn woke before sunrise. I found her sitting at the edge of our bed, trying to fasten the clasp of a necklace Aaron had given her when he was 12. His little hands had picked it from a church bazaar. It was cheap silver with a tiny blue stone, but she kept it all those years in a velvet box like it was something from Tiffany. "Help me, Walt," she said. I fastened it for her. Her hair was white and soft at the temples. Her hands shook as she smoothed her dress. "You look beautiful," I told her. She gave me a tired little smile. "I hope I don't slow anything down. Brothers and sisters, I want you to hear that." She was the reason the building existed, and still her biggest worry was that she might be in the way. When we arrived, the parking lot was packed. There were white tents on the lawn, a string quartet near the fountain, waiters carrying trays of sparkling water, and a photographer kneeling to get shots of the ribbon from a low angle. Claire had turned my wife's dream into a magazine cover. Aaron looked successful. That is the cleanest way I can say it. Navy suit, silver watch, teeth too white, shoulders back like a man who had convinced himself he built the hill he was standing on. Claire stood beside him in a cream-colored dress, giving instructions with 2 fingers in the air. Then Evelyn's walker clicked against the stone path. Not loud, just a soft little sound. Metal, rubber, stone. Click, pause, click. Claire heard it. She turned slowly, and I watched her face change. I had seen that change before. I had seen it in shop windows when she caught our reflection beside hers. I had seen it at restaurants when Evelyn needed help standing. It was the look of a woman who believed weakness was contagious. She walked over fast, smiling for the guests, until she reached us. Then the smile disappeared. "Evelyn," she said, low but not low enough. "We talked about this. You were supposed to sit inside until after the photos." My wife blinked. "I wanted to see the ribbon." Claire's eyes flicked to the walker. "The donors are here. The press is here. We need this to feel hopeful, not depressing." I felt my jaw tighten. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the handles. "I'm sorry," I thought. Claire cut her off. "Move her away from the cameras. That walker makes this place look like a charity ward." The words went out into the morning and landed everywhere. You could hear the string quartet falter. One violin note bent wrong and faded. A woman near the tent raised her hand to her mouth. A photographer lowered his camera. And my wife, my Evelyn, the woman who had once worked 16-hour shifts and then come home to pack Aaron's lunch, looked down at the pavement as if the ground might be kinder than the people standing on it. I did not look at Claire. I looked at Aaron. He had heard every word. He was close enough to smell his own cologne coming off that ribbon. He looked from his wife to his mother, and for 1 second, I saw the boy he used to be. The boy who ran to Evelyn when thunder shook the windows. The boy who cried when she worked Christmas Eve. The boy who used to press his cheek against her sleeve and say she smelled like soap and peppermint. Then that boy disappeared. Aaron stepped toward his mother and said, "Mom, please, just go inside for a little while. Claire has worked too hard for this." "Not we. Not you, Claire." Evelyn nodded, but her eyes were wet. That was when I felt something inside me go still. Not hot, not loud. Still, like a lake right before the ice cracks. I put my hand over Evelyn's. "We're leaving," I said. Claire exhaled like I was a problem she had expected. "Walter, don't be dramatic." I did not answer her. I helped my wife turn around. It took time. That is what people like Claire hate about the old and the injured. They take time. The walker had to be lifted slightly at the edge of the stone. Evelyn's right foot dragged when she was nervous. Her breathing got shallow. Every second stretched long enough for everyone to see what shame looks like when it is placed on a good woman's shoulders. We moved down the path. Click. Pause. Click. And then, behind us, a chair scraped. Pastor Henry Bell stood up. He was 82, tall, thin, with a voice that had buried half the county and married the other half. He had known Evelyn since she was a girl. He did not say one word. He just picked up his hat and started walking after us. Then Dr. Lenora Hayes stood. She ran the largest hospital network in Middle Tennessee. Evelyn had trained under her years ago. She followed. Then Judge Whitcomb stood. Then the county commissioner. Then 3 women from the hospital board. Then donors who had written checks because Evelyn had sat with their parents in their final hours. One by one, the important people Claire had polished that morning for began leaving the ribbon cutting and walking behind my wife. No speeches, no shouting, just footsteps. I heard Claire whisper, "Aaron?" I did not turn around, but I knew my son's face had changed. I knew it because power has a smell when it starts leaking out of a room. At the truck, Pastor Bell opened the passenger door himself. Dr. Hayes held Evelyn's walker while I helped my wife into the seat. Evelyn tried to apologize to them. Imagine that. A woman publicly humiliated by her own family, still trying to make others comfortable. Dr. Hayes touched her cheek and said, "Honey, you have nothing to apologize for." We drove home in silence. Evelyn watched the hills roll by. Her hands rested in her lap, twisted together, the little blue stone at her neck trembling with each breath. She did not cry until we reached the old farmhouse. Then she sat in the kitchen, under the same yellow light where the dream had first been spoken, and whispered, "He was ashamed of me." Not Claire. Aaron. That is the wound that does not close right. A stranger can insult you, and you can survive it. But when your own child steps aside and lets them do it, something holy breaks. I made Evelyn tea. I wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Then I walked out to the barn, shut the door, and called our attorney, Marion Price. Marion was 79 and had the kind of voice that sounded like paper being folded carefully. She had handled every deed, covenant, donation agreement, and operating restriction tied to Willow Grace. She knew things Aaron and Claire had never bothered to ask because they thought old documents were just old people's clutter. "Marion," I said, "pull the land agreement." She was quiet for a moment. "All of it?" she asked. "All of it." Then I added, "And check every amendment they've filed in the last 6 months." That night, I slept in the chair beside Evelyn's bed. She had a bad headache after too much stress, and I listened to her breathe. Around 2 in the morning, my phone lit up with a text from Aaron. "Dad, you embarrassed us today. We'll talk when everyone calms down." I stared at that message for a long time. He thought I embarrassed him. Not the woman who shamed his mother in front of half the county. Not himself for standing there with scissors in his hand and cowardice in his mouth. Me. By breakfast, Marion called. Her first words were, "Walter, sit down." I did not sit. She told me Claire and Aaron had filed a petition with the county planning office to convert the back 6 acres into luxury recovery cottages. Not elder care. Not affordable respite rooms like Evelyn wanted. Private short-stay suites for wealthy surgery patients from Nashville. Spa meals. Concierge nurses. $5,000 a week. That was bad enough. But it was not the worst. The land agreement Evelyn signed years earlier had one condition carved into it like scripture. As long as she lived and remained competent, no part of that land could be used for any purpose outside elder care without her written approval. So Claire had found another way. Marion had discovered a notarized statement attached to the petition, claiming Evelyn's stroke had left her unable to understand business matters. It requested that Aaron be recognized as her family representative for all property decisions tied to Willow Grace. My hand closed so hard around the phone I thought I might crack it. "Who signed that statement?" I asked. "A physician assistant Evelyn has never seen," Marion said, "and a notary whose commission expired last spring." I looked through the kitchen window. Evelyn was outside by the bird feeder, moving slowly with her walker, scattering seed for cardinals. The morning sun caught her white hair. She looked fragile from a distance. That is the mistake careless people make. They think fragile means empty. They think slow means stupid. They think a trembling hand cannot still hold a line. They're trying to take her voice, I said. Yes, Marion said softly. I believe they are. I did not call Aaron. I did not call Claire. I did not call the county. Not yet. A man my age learns that some doors only open when arrogant people are pushing from the other side. I wanted them to push all the way through. 3 days later, Aaron came to the farmhouse alone. He arrived in a black SUV we had helped pay for, wearing a suit too fine for a son visiting his mother. Evelyn was in the front room folding dish towels. She looked up when he came in, and for one painful second, hope crossed her face. He barely glanced at her. He set a folder on the table in front of me and said, "Dad, this needs to be handled cleanly." "Does it?" He tapped the folder. "It's just an authorization. Mom's condition has created some complications with the expansion. Claire and I can manage the property decisions. It'll protect everybody." Evelyn's towel slipped from her hands. "Property decisions?" she said. Aaron's mouth tightened. "Mom, please don't get upset. This is exactly what I mean. Stress isn't good for you. There are moments when memory comes like a knife. I remembered a winter when Aaron was 8 and I had 3 customers go bankrupt in the same month. We were down to beans, cornbread, and pride. Evelyn had one good coat then, brown wool with a cracked button. Aaron needed a coat for school. She cut the lining out of hers and sewed it into a second-hand one for him so he would be warm waiting for the bus. She told him hers was at the cleaners. That boy grew up, and there he stood in our kitchen telling that woman she could not understand her own land. I opened the folder. There were signature lines for me. For Evelyn. There were phrases like streamlined decision-making and temporary representation. Pretty words. Poison wrapped in ribbon. I slid the folder back. "No," I said. Aaron blinked. "Dad." "No." His face hardened. "You don't understand what you're interfering with." I stood up then. Slowly. My knees are not what they were, but I stood straight enough. "I understand exactly what I'm interfering with." He looked toward his mother then, finally. Not with love, with irritation. "Mom, tell him. We're trying to build something." Evelyn looked at our son. Her voice shook, but the words came clear. "I did build something, Aaron. You just stopped seeing me in it." For the first time, he had no answer. He gathered his folder and left with his jaw tight, and when his SUV disappeared down the gravel drive, Evelyn began to cry. I sat beside her and took her hand. "You are not a burden," I told her. "You are the reason there is a roof over all of them." That evening, Marion and I made our plan. The State Elder Care Association Gala was scheduled for Friday night at the Belmead Hotel in Nashville. Willow Grace was receiving a regional award for innovation in compassionate care. Claire had campaigned for it for a year. There would be reporters, health officials, donors, and the same people who had watched my wife get pushed aside. Claire thought that night would crown her. I decided that night would tell the truth. I wore my old charcoal suit. Evelyn stayed home. She wanted to come, but her blood pressure had been running high, and I would not let that room take one more ounce from her. Before I left, she pinned Aaron's little blue necklace inside my jacket pocket. "For courage," she said. I kissed her forehead. "No," I told her. "For remembrance." The ballroom at the Belmead glittered the way places glitter when money wants to feel noble. White tablecloths, gold chairs, ice sculptures, big screens looping footage of smiling seniors and bright hallways. Claire's face appeared in half the video clips, bending over residents like she had invented kindness. Aaron stood near the stage, shaking hands. Claire was beside him, laughing with the mayor's wife. She saw me from across the room. The laughter stopped. She came toward me fast, but not too fast for the cameras to notice. Her smile stayed on until she reached my table in the back. "Walter," she said, "this is not the place." I was sitting alone with a glass of water. "For what?" I asked. "For whatever performance you're planning. I came to watch you receive your award." Her eyes went flat. "You are not on the guest list." "No," I said. "I imagine not." She leaned closer. "If you care about Evelyn at all, you won't make this harder on Aaron." There it was. The same old trick. Use the wounded person as a shield while you hold the knife. I looked at her carefully. Claire was not stupid. She was scared. I had learned enough by then to know she grew up bouncing between relatives, embarrassed by thrift store clothes, swearing she would never be poor enough for pity again. Somewhere along the line, she decided appearances were armor. If everything looked perfect, nobody could look down on her. I understood that, but pain explains a thing. It does not excuse it. You should go back to your table, I said. She signaled to two hotel security men near the wall. I'm going to ask you one time to leave quietly. Before I could answer, the lights dimmed. Music rose. The master of ceremonies walked to the podium and welcomed everyone to a night honoring dignity and aging. I almost laughed at that. Sometimes God allows irony to dress in a tuxedo. The security men stood behind my chair. Claire stayed in front of me, half turned toward the stage, trapped between removing me and being seen removing me. The MC began talking about Willow Grace Living. He praised its beautiful campus, its community partnerships, its bold expansion plans. Claire's shoulders relaxed. Then he said, "Before we present tonight's award, there has been an important update regarding the founding ownership and land covenant of Willow Grace." Claire went still. Aaron looked up from the front table. The MC glanced toward the side of the stage. Marion Price walked out with a leather folder in her hands. A murmur moved through the room. Marion did not smile. She took the microphone and said, "The land on which Willow Grace sits was not donated to a corporation. It was placed under a protected covenant by Mrs. Evelyn Briggs, a retired nurse, for the care of elderly residents who might otherwise be forgotten. That covenant remains active. It has not been amended. It has not been transferred. And Mrs. Briggs has not authorized the expansion currently being represented to donors." Claire stepped forward. "This is a private family matter." Marion turned a page. "It is no longer private when false statements are filed with a county office." The room changed. You could feel it. People sat up. Forks stopped moving. Cameras lifted. Marion continued. She laid out the expired notary stamp, the false capacity statement, the fact that the physician assistant had never examined Evelyn. She showed emails between Claire and a developer discussing luxury recovery cottages on land restricted for elder care. She showed internal budget sheets where funds raised for resident assistance had been moved into marketing expenses for the expansion campaign. Every sentence pulled one brick out of the wall Claire had built. Aaron stood, pale and shaking. "Dad," he said, not loud, but the microphone caught it. I rose from the back table. The security men stepped away from me like I had become hot to the touch. I walked toward the stage. Not quickly. I am too old to hurry for people who should have listened the first time. My shoes sounded against the polished floor. Step, step, step. The room watched me the way that Lon had watched Evelyn. When I reached the front, Marion handed me the microphone. I looked at my son. Then I looked at Claire. Then I looked out at all those polished faces. "My wife could not be here tonight," I said. 3 days ago, this organization called her condition a complication. Last week, at the grand opening of the care center built from her dream, she was asked to move out of camera view because her walker made the place look bad. A sound went through the room, not loud enough. I reached into my jacket and took out the little blue necklace. Our son bought this for his mother when he was 12. She wore it to that opening because she still believed he remembered who loved him before the world applauded him. Aaron put a hand over his mouth. I did not soften. Evelyn Briggs is not incompetent. She is not a prop. She is not a marketing phrase. And she is not a problem to be managed by people standing on her land. Claire came up the steps then, mascara shining under the lights. "You bitter old man," she hissed. "You're destroying everything." I turned to her. "No," I said. "You built on someone else's mercy and called it your empire. I'm only removing the lie." Then Dr. Hayes stood from the front row. She announced that the hospital network was suspending its partnership pending investigation. The county commissioner stood next, stating the expansion petition would be withdrawn. Pastor Bell rose and said every church donation collected in Evelyn's name would be redirected to resident care, not construction. The state licensing representative requested immediate review of management practices. One by one, the hands holding Claire up let go. The award was not presented that night. By morning, the story was everywhere. Not because I shouted, not because I wanted fame, because people who sell compassion while humiliating the weak always think nobody is keeping receipts. Willow Grace did not close. I made sure of that. The residents had done nothing wrong. Nurses still came to work. Meals were still served. Medications still went out on time. but Aaron and Claire were removed from management by emergency board action. The luxury expansion died before the first shovel touched the dirt. Their house went up for sale within 10 days. The SUV disappeared. Claire's friends stopped returning calls. Aaron sent me messages at first angry, then pleading, then broken. I answered only once. Your mother is safe. That is my concern now. About 3 weeks later, during a hard rain that beat against the farmhouse windows, someone knocked on our door. Evelyn was in her chair with a quilt across her knees. She looked toward the sound, and I saw that mother's reflex wake in her. It does not matter how deep the wound goes. A mother still hears her child in the rain. I opened the curtain. Aaron stood on the porch, soaked through, his hair plastered to his forehead. Claire stood behind him with no makeup, arms wrapped around herself. They looked smaller without the lights. Aaron pressed his hand to the glass. "Dad," he called, voice cracking. "Please, I need to talk to Mom." Evelyn began to rise. I put my hand gently on her shoulder. "No," I said. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "He's my boy." "I know," I said. "And you are my wife." I went to the door, but I did not open it. I spoke through the wood. "There is a motel room paid for under your names for 3 nights off Highway 96. There is a list at the desk of legal aid offices and job placement services. After that, your life is yours to rebuild." Aaron cried harder. "Dad, we're sorry." I closed my eyes. "No," I said. "You're scared. Sorry comes later, if it comes at all. Sorry is not what a man says when the rain starts. Sorry is what he lives when the sky is clear and nobody is watching." Claire whispered something I could not hear. Aaron said, "Mom, please." Behind me, Evelyn was crying silently. I could feel it without turning around. I wanted to open that door. I want you to know that. I am not made of stone. I remembered carrying Aaron on my shoulders through the county fair. I remembered teaching him to bait a hook. I remembered his little hand in mine crossing a church parking lot. But I also remembered my wife on that stone path, shrinking in front of strangers while our son protected his image instead of his mother's heart. Some lines, once crossed, require distance before forgiveness can even learn to breathe. I did not open the door. After a while, the footsteps moved away. Evelyn did not speak for a long time. Then she said, "Do you think I failed him?" I knelt beside her chair. "No, Evie," I said. "He failed what you gave him." 6 months later, the sign at the entrance changed. Willow Grace Living became the Evelyn Briggs Home for Forgotten Elders. Not luxury cottages, not a brand. A real place. We added the affordable respite rooms Evelyn wanted. We put the rocking chairs back on the porch. We painted the walls warm yellow. We made the stone path even wider. And beside it, we placed a small bench under a maple tree with a brass plaque. It reads, "No one who needs time is a burden." Evelyn sits there some mornings when the weather is kind. Residents stop to talk to her. Nurses ask her advice. Families who come to visit their parents shake her hand without knowing the whole story. She likes that best. She says kindness should not need a spotlight. Aaron writes letters now. Real letters, not texts, not excuses. He has a job managing inventory at a hardware store in Murfreesboro. Claire left him for a while, then came back, then left again. I do not follow that closely. Their road is theirs. Evelyn reads Aaron's letters, but has not invited him to visit yet. That is her choice. And finally, after a lifetime of giving everyone else the first chair at the table, my wife is learning that her choice matters. So, son, daughter, brother, sister, whoever you are listening to this right now, let me ask you something plain. Who in your life have you started treating like background furniture because they got slower? Who do you rush past because their story takes too long? Who held you up when you were young, and now you act embarrassed when they need a hand? Call them. Not tomorrow. Not when things calm down. Call them before the walker clicks on stone and a room full of strangers sees what you forgot. And if you've stayed with me this long, leave me a number. Comment 1 if you believe I did right by my wife. Comment 2 if you think I should have opened the door that night. Comment 3 if you think some consequences are the only way people learn. Tell me where you're watching from. 2. I like knowing how far Evelyn's story travels. Because somewhere out there, there is an old mother sitting by a phone that does not ring. There is a father pretending he does not care that nobody visits. There is a wife apologizing for needing help from the man she held together for 40 years. And maybe there is a son or daughter who still has time to remember. The person who built your foundation may not stand tall anymore. They may move slowly. They may repeat themselves. They may need your arm to cross a room. But never mistake that for weakness. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding up the whole house. Sometimes love means more than opening every door. It means protecting the person who has spent a lifetime holding everyone else together. Gratitude begins in small, ordinary choices. A phone call, a patient hand, a seat saved at the table. When we honor the people who once carried us, we give our own families something steady to stand on.